Most citizens and governments around the world now recognise the seriousness of the situation we are in with the coronavirus and have banned mass gatherings as part of public health measures. Because of these enforced restrictions, sporting bodies and event organisers around the globe are either postponing their seasons or cancelling them entirely, as we can see in most sports from football to tennis, and F1 is absolutely no different. As of recording this video, we know that the FIA have said the season will hopefully begin in June at the French Grand Prix. However, the races in Australia, Bahrain, China, Vietnam, Spain, Azerbaijan and Canada have been postponed, whilst Monaco has been cancelled completely and will return next year. The situation is changing very quickly and each day counts, as we saw from the horrific way the FIA and Formula 1 handled things in Australia. I thought I'd make this video to see what options the sport could take to complete the season, if it can be completed at all. We have no idea what each country will be like in a few months' time, but experts initially predicted that we will reach the peak infection rate in June and July, and that's without considering any possibility of reinfection, as the data is not really available yet as things are changing very quickly. I predicted a few weeks ago that Australia and Bahrain would go ahead, but due to the massive increases in cases up until the summer, I thought that none of the races after that would go ahead up until the Singapore Grand Prix in September, and then things will carry on as normal until the end of the season. As I said before, the situation is constantly changing, which is making things incredibly hard to predict, and that's without considering a second wave of infection that could potentially put countries on lockdown even more. The way different countries are tackling the virus makes things even more complicated. Now, I don't want to get too sciencey, but in order for everybody to gain herd immunity, at least 80% of a country's population would need to be infected, and a vaccine is usually available to ensure deaths are minimal. We do not have a vaccine at the moment, and we won't do for a long time. So by putting countries on lockdown, it makes the virus spread even slower. This means it will probably be around for a while, so achieving herd immunity could take between 12 to 18 months until a vaccine is developed and fully tested. This will inevitably have an impact on the start of the season. The rules state that in order for a championship to be officially completed, there needs to be a minimum of 8 races in a season. If the second half of my prediction comes true, that will mean that only 7 races will be completed and the 2020 season would technically have no champion. Whether that means the races will be classed as non-championship races would have to be clarified. However, as some of the races are postponed rather than cancelled, the calendar could be altered to fit these races in. This is the approach that FIA is currently taking, as they have announced that the summer shutdown has moved to now to allow a calendar reshuffle. This would result in the calendar being incredibly compact from June to August, with hardly any break between each race. This idea does make sense, as the European races are geographically closer together, so there's less travel time between each circuit, but it's still a logistical nightmare for the teams, and the staff aren't really going to get a break to see their families for a very long time if the season does go ahead. Now, I'm not too optimistic about the season starting when the FIA want it to, but if my prediction does come true, then what I'd love to see is a super season, beginning towards the end of 2020 and continuing right throughout 2021, a bit like what Formula E do. This could possibly expand the calendar to 25 races and bring in tracks that we've not really seen or that have been recently dropped, such as Hockenheim. This could be done, as F1 have announced that the 2021 regulations have been pushed back further and will start in either 2022 or 2023. However, the cost cap of $175 million will still be introduced next year. The team's chassis design will be frozen, along with other key components, but they can still develop aerodynamic devices. McLaren have been given permission by the FIA to alter their chassis, as they'll be continuing their agreement to switch to Mercedes engines from next year. I'm not too sure how that agreement would work if the super season does go ahead, as it's over 2 years, as it's not easy swapping one engine manufacturer for another mid-season, both contractually and technically. But I'm sure McLaren are going to sort it out over the next few months when we know when the season will officially start. On this channel, my aim is to be as balanced as possible, but at times I do like to put my own personal feelings across. I'm no expert when it comes to virology, but I have been following this topic ever since the information was available to the public in January, and the people I've been listening to are not too optimistic that this will go away anytime soon. So I have a really bad feeling that this season might be a complete write-off, but we should remain as positive as possible. If the season does go ahead, I would absolutely love a super season and have 25 races with tracks going back that we haven't seen in ages, like Imola, Turkey and Fuji Speedway, to give a proper send-off to this era of cars before the new regulations come in. I don't really like the idea of having 8 races to crown a champion, as in this modern age of F1, it seems too small of a number to determine the final stand-ins. I remember growing up and watching seasons with 16 to 18 races, and if I was a newer fan today, I couldn't imagine having that many. So 8 would seem ridiculous, even if it was the norm in the 50s and 60s. Obviously, health comes before everything else, and I don't want risks taken that could potentially affect anybody's life, So I hope the FIA make the right decision and put people before money, as we know that hasn't always been the case. I'm looking at you, Indy 2005. The situation is continuously developing, but if the season doesn't go ahead, then of course we'll all be disappointed, but safety is paramount. In the meantime, there's plenty of free F1 related content on different platforms. There are classic races being shown on F1's official YouTube and Facebook pages each week, whilst I'm sure you know the various esports events that are taking place with guests from the motoring world and beyond. Although the wait for the season is really difficult, just think of the excitement and happiness you'll be feeling when it eventually gets underway. Now you've heard my opinion, I'd love to know yours. What do you think the FIA should do in this situation? Should we only complete 8 races? Do you like my idea of a super season? Are there any tracks you'd like to see come back to the calendar if it does get extended? And if you could only have 8 tracks on this year's calendar, what would they be and why? I can't wait to see what you put in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.